Hey everyone, welcome back to Six Path Weeb. Today, we're diving into part 2 of Naruko guarded by Mito, a continuation of our intriguing look into this unique what-if scenario. Quick disclaimer, this channel is dedicated to entertainment and thoughtful discussion. I do not own any of the anime content featured here, all credit goes to the original creators and rightful copyright holders. Alright, without further ado, let's jump right into it. 29 days before the finals. At dawn, Mito awoke to a familiar ceiling, one she hadn't seen in years. She never expected to return to Konoha after Tsunade's departure and Kushina's passing. But that changed when she met Naruko. While not related by immediate family ties, they shared the heritage of the Uzumaki clan. And as Mito had told Naruko the day before, the responsibility of being a Jinchuriki, in part, was hers as well. It was important to ensure that Naruko could protect herself, something Mito felt her current mentors weren't fully equipping her for. After rising, Mito dressed in a red tank top and a pair of black pants, deciding to forego her sandals and remain barefoot. She pulled her long red hair into a simple ponytail before heading to the kitchen. To her surprise, a set of clean dishes was neatly arranged in the drying rack, dishes that hadn't been there the night before. She had planned to cook breakfast for Naruko as a way of easing into the intense training ahead, but it appeared Naruko had taken the initiative. Stepping outside, Mito found Naruko in the yard, two versions of her. In fact, the two girls faced off before quickly engaging in a short match. The real Naruko landed a solid strike on her clone, causing it to vanish in a puff of smoke. Impressive, Mito said, drawing Naruko's attention. Naruko beamed. Oh, hey, Mito-sensei. That was the shadow clone technique, Mito noted. Naruko had already told her she could perform it, but seeing it in action was something else entirely. Yeah. It's one of my favorite techniques. I learned it the night I graduated. Mito's expression turned thoughtful. She recalled a conversation with Naruko from months ago, and another with Lord Third just the day before. Slowly, the missing pieces of the bigger picture began to come together. It's a very useful technique. Do you know it? Naruko asked eagerly. Mito shook her head. I never learned that particular jutsu, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't find it practical for my style. The chakra requirement is high, and I found more efficient methods for my needs. As a Jinchuriki, however, that limitation doesn't affect you. She could have likely used it during her time as a Jinchuriki, but it never fit her approach to combat. I do know a variation, the Shadow Shuriken technique. Still, today it's my turn to be your teacher. Naruko gave an enthusiastic nod. So what are we starting with? I need to grab my training pack from inside. Meet me in the backyard in 15 minutes. With that, Mito went back inside. Not because she needed that much time, but because she wanted a moment to enjoy breakfast. Exactly 15 minutes later, they regrouped at the rear of the estate. Naruko's eyes widened at the sight of a complex obstacle course spread across the grounds. This training course is designed to challenge both body and mind, Mito explained. I'd like you to run it. Naruko nodded and jumped into action. She climbed ropes, crawled under barriers, balanced across beams, and dodged swinging obstacles. She even managed to leap over a pit. By the time she completed it, 3 minutes later, she was catching her breath, clearly winded. Mito, watching closely, seemed satisfied. The two then walked to the front of the estate, stopping near a towering sequoia tree. Mito pointed to a kunai embedded near the top. It had a small orange tassel tied to its hilt, making it easy to spot. That kunai marks the end of your training. We have 29 days. When you can reach it and retrieve it, your training will be complete. Naruko smiled confidently. I'll go get it right now. She took off running, chakra focused at her feet. But the moment she came within a few feet of the tree, she dropped to the ground as if something heavy had pushed her down. The tree is surrounded by a gravity-based seal, Mito explained, a hint of amusement in her voice. Anyone who enters its range will experience a dramatic increase in weight. Right now, you're feeling about 5 times heavier than normal. She reached into the seal's range, carefully, and pulled Naruko back out. Naruko gasped slightly as the pressure eased. Wow! That's intense, she murmured, taking another look up at the tall tree. Do you see why I don't expect you to reach the kunai right away? Naruko said nothing, but her gaze remained locked on the goal high above. There are 3 ways to use sealing techniques in combat, Mito began. The first, as I mentioned yesterday, is writing chakra-based sealing arrays. She lightly tapped Naruko on the cheek to make her point, then gestured to the tree. You just encountered the second, traps and environmental seals. The third is applying seals to weapons directly, often using tags. This method is the most accessible and the one you'll be using for your upcoming exam. I'll train you, and give you the materials, but every item you bring to the test must be created by you. Naruko nodded seriously, imagining what kinds of tools Mito might have in her own collection. But she understood, this had to be her victory. Just having the tools isn't enough, Mito continued. The most critical part of this next month is your physical training. Under normal circumstances, I'd have you build your strength gradually, but since time is limited and your exam is soon, we'll be using a different approach. Naruko raised an eyebrow, curious. What kind of approach? There are two options, Mito said, her expression growing more focused. The fastest and most direct path would be for you to fully connect with the chakra of the spirit within you. Naruko's eyes widened, and she glanced down, her bangs falling over her face as she processed the weight of that idea. I'm not sure if Lady Hiruzen or anyone else has spoken to you about this, but I can help you learn to manage it. I have the knowledge, and it would be a fairly simple task for me, if that's what you truly want. Naruko didn't need long to respond. What's the other option? There was a determined edge in her voice. You're not in favor of this method? The blonde shrugged. You're having me create my own sealing tools, even though you could probably give me something way better. I get why, it's about me relying on myself, not just your abilities. Same goes for the tailed beast. If I just depend on its power, I'm not really growing stronger on my own. Mito smiled kindly. Eventually, you'll need to learn how to work with the tailed beast's chakra. But I agree, your foundation should be your own strength. She motioned for Naruko to follow her around the house. My grandmother created a training method that became popular in Uzushio when I was younger. She looked over at Naruko. Have you heard of the 8 gates? Naruko's mind flashed back to the Chunin exams. Yeah, that guy with the thick eyebrows used it against someone from the Sand Village. Mito made a mental note to ask about the nicknames later. The training focuses on the first gate, the gate of opening. Normally, people only use about 20% of their strength at any time. Pushing beyond that could cause strain. The first gate acts like a natural limit to keep the body safe. My grandmother's method involves gradually overcoming that limit. Naruko nodded as she tried to absorb the lesson. How do you do that? Typically, you train until you can open the gate yourself. Then you keep it open under supervision so your body adapts. A skilled medical ninja would help monitor and treat any muscle strain. With time, your body grows stronger. It's not an easy process, it takes about 6 months and can be uncomfortable. She gave Naruko a focused look. But I'm hoping you'll be able to complete it in 1 month. Naruko blinked. How? Your natural healing ability, Mito explained. It should help you adjust more quickly. We'll also skip a few of the usual steps. Naruko tilted her head. Skip what steps? Normally, you'd spend the first month learning to move properly with the gate open. But with your unique abilities, we're going to begin the main training right away. They reached the back of the compound again. Did you do this training too? Naruko asked. Mito nodded. I did. Though my body changed later due to a special technique passed down in my family. Your mother also trained using this method before. Well, before she was sealed. A wave of emotion stirred in Naruko. It wasn't directed at Mito, not really, just the idea that her mother might have faced similar hardships. She didn't know much about her, but the thought weighed on her heart. All right, I'll do it. How do I open the gate? You don't, Mito said gently. Learning to open all 8 gates is a long journey, so we'll take a small shortcut. She placed her hand on Naruko's head. A soft warmth radiated from her touch, though Naruko couldn't see the energy itself. I'm going to unlock it for you and seal it open temporarily. Ready? Mito's other hand began to glow with a soft, purple light. Naruko took a deep breath and nodded. Mito gently tapped 2 fingers to Naruko's forehead. The change was immediate. A shiver passed through her body, and her knees nearly buckled. Her temperature rose, and her limbs tingled briefly. But along with that came a powerful rush of energy and renewed stamina. Mito watched calmly as dark markings shimmered across Naruko's forehead before settling into a small symbol hidden beneath her hair. How do you feel? It took a moment, but Naruko eventually grinned. Great. Let's run the course. Naruko dashed forward. The improvement in speed was obvious. Her movements were faster and lighter, though she struggled to control her strength at first, occasionally overshooting or slipping. When she returned, she landed neatly in front of Mito. How'd I do? Just under 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Your speed has increased a lot. Now, you just need to get used to handling it. Naruko nodded. So, What's next? Mito smiled at her enthusiasm. It's wonderful seeing her so energetic. How about a light run? Naruko tilted her head. Aren't we supposed to be sparring or something? Mito chuckled softly. How about a race? There's a line of trees along the compound wall. The rule is simple, don't touch the ground. Naruko brightened at the idea. She and Mito climbed to the top of one of the trees. Mito planted a kunai with an orange tassel into the trunk. Ready? Mito stood casually. Naruko crouched, ready to spring. 3, 2, 1. Go. The change was striking. Naruko moved with powerful bursts, causing branches to shake and leaves to fall. Mito, by contrast, moved with graceful ease. It didn't even look like she was touching the trees at all. The only other person Naruko had seen move like that was her teacher, Kakashi. By the end, Mito had won. Naruko looked surprised. Want to go again? Mito asked playfully. How did you do that? Naruko asked, wide-eyed. Do what? You didn't even shake the branches. How'd you move like that? Mito smiled. It takes practice. I can move more slowly this time, so you can watch more closely if you'd like? Naruko nodded eagerly. Throughout the day, Mito continued to guide Naruko through intense training. With each activity, Naruko found herself adjusting to her new strength. Between drills, Mito taught her about sealing techniques and quizzed her on earlier lessons. When Naruko got something wrong, Mito would toss a soft training projectile in her direction, never hard enough to hurt, just enough to remind her to stay alert. The only real breaks came at lunch and dinner. Even then, Mito used the time to continue explaining techniques and strategies. They even practiced sparring for a bit, which is when Mito introduced Naruko to a second taijutsu style, common in Uzushigaku, called Kurokamiken. The style was frustrating. Mito stood casually, in no clear stance, while Naruko tried to land a hit. Mito would effortlessly dodge by shifting slightly to the side, all the while calmly pointing out what Naruko could improve in her technique. The first time Naruko repeated a mistake, Mito gently redirected her arm and used Naruko's own momentum to move her off balance. If the same mistake was repeated again, Mito's corrections became firmer, meant to help Naruko understand the importance of focus and discipline. As twilight settled in, Mito invited Naruko inside the Senju compound to a quiet, empty room. She gave Naruko a look the young kunoichi had come to recognize as her "I'm about to give you a lesson" expression. Taijutsu, Genjutsu, and Ninjutsu are the three core disciplines every shinobi is expected to learn, Mito began seriously. I've seen you use Taijutsu and Ninjutsu. Tell me, how's your Genjutsu? Naruko shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. It's something we'll work on in the future, Mito said kindly. But for now, I want to help you explore a unique ability given to you by the Kyubi no Yoko. Naruko's eyes lit up with curiosity. You already benefit from incredible healing and a large chakra reserve, those are natural. But there's another skill you can learn, a kind of empathic sensing. Huh? It means you can train yourself to feel others' emotions on a deeper level. Naruko frowned slightly, thinking it over. At first, she didn't think it sounded very useful, especially if it came from the Kyubi. Why couldn't the fox have given me some awesome ability to move objects with my mind? But then a thought struck her. Could I use it to tell when someone's lying? Mito smiled. Yes. If you learn how to interpret feelings like nervousness, fear, or sadness, it becomes possible to detect dishonesty. This ability can even be used in combat or to sense people nearby. Seeing Naruko's puzzled look, Mito explained further. Picture yourself in a forest. Suddenly you sense a strong emotion, fear, frustration, or something similar. That's a sign you're not alone. Naruko nodded. Okay, so where do we start? For now, we meditate together. Step by step, alright? A few hours later, Mito allowed Naruko to rest, reminding her not to push too far in her training for the day. Surprisingly, Naruko still felt full of energy, but decided it would be smart to get to bed early to wake up refreshed. The room provided to her, once her mother's, had its own bathroom. She grabbed a towel and took a quick shower. When she returned to her room, towel wrapped snugly around her, she found Mito waiting. Mito wore a simple sleep kimono, her hair still slightly damp, suggesting she had also just showered. Naruko blinked in surprise. Hey, she said, a little unsure. If you don't mind, could you lie down on your stomach? Mito gestured gently to the bed. Before Naruko could ask why, Mito added, I'm not a medical nin, but I know a few techniques. I'd like to check how your muscles are responding to today's training. Naruko hesitated, then nodded. They feel fine, she said casually. In truth, her muscles were incredibly sore, more than they had been in a long time. But she figured it wasn't anything serious. I'd still like to take a look. Mito gestured again, and Naruko obliged, lying down on the bed. She expected Mito to examine her briefly and leave, but instead, Mito joined her on the bed and gently placed her hands on Naruko's back, beginning a careful massage. Naruko gasped quietly in surprise, but Mito softly guided her to relax. As I mentioned, I don't use advanced techniques, but this method can still be helpful, Mito explained calmly. Despite herself, Naruko felt the tension slowly ease out of her body. Mito worked through the tightness in her back, shoulders, and arms, gradually helping Naruko unwind from the day's training. You need more protein in your meals, Mito remarked quietly. Naruko barely registered the comment, her mind was already drifting toward sleep. When Mito moved on to gently loosen the muscles in her legs, Naruko was too relaxed to respond. By the time Mito quietly left the room, Naruko had already fallen asleep, comfortable and at peace, ready to take on whatever the next day would bring. 28 days before the finals. Naruko woke up before dawn, just like she had the day before. The moment she stirred, a wave of pain rushed through her body, wiping away any traces of sleepiness. The discomfort was intense, enough to make her want to cry out, but she instead released a soft groan. Naruko tried to swing her leg off the bed, only to feel an even sharper sting. Her entire body ached. Inch by inch, she managed to move herself off the bed, only to tumble gently onto the floor with a startled yelp. She groaned and pushed herself up, though her arms trembled from the effort. It was a struggle to stay balanced, but she managed to stay upright. Reaching toward the bed for support, she slowly pulled herself up. Her knees threatened to give out, but she managed to remain on her feet by gripping the edge of the mattress. She tried again and finally made it upright, hunched over but standing. Now, she just needed to reach. You did not rise early this morning. Naruko would have jumped if she hadn't been so startled already. Instead, she slowly turned toward the voice. Mito stood at the doorway, dressed once again in her usual training attire. How are you feeling? Mito asked calmly. A quiet whimper was the only response Naruko could give. I will begin breakfast. Please try to be at the table within 15 minutes, Mito added. She turned to leave but paused, looking Naruko up and down. Also, please wear proper clothes. With that, she left the room. Naruko's eyes widened when she realized she had fallen asleep in only a towel, and it had fallen off sometime during her attempt to get up. She blushed deeply and, in her flustered state, lost her balance and gently collapsed onto the floor again. As if to add to her embarrassment, her stomach let out a loud rumble. With a determined sigh, she knew she had to get dressed and make it to breakfast, hopefully within the next 15 minutes. She managed to make it in 30. She finally limped her way into the kitchen where Mito sat quietly reading a book. There were 2 bowls on the table, but only hers was full. It looked like fried rice, and Naruko assumed Mito had already eaten her portion. She sat down, carefully picked up the chopsticks set beside her bowl, and tried to eat. But her hands struggled to hold the utensils properly. After multiple failed attempts, she let out a frustrated breath and began to pick at her food with one hand instead. Despite her dislike for fried rice, with her aching body and empty stomach, it tasted like a gourmet meal. Before she could grab another handful, a gentle hand rested on hers. Looking up, Naruko saw Mito gazing at her, expression calm but firm. Without a word, Mito held out her chopsticks again. Naruko gave her a pleading look, but Mito simply gestured to the chopsticks once more. Reluctantly, Naruko accepted them and tried again, and again, and again until she finally managed to bring a small bite to her mouth. We need to talk about the rest of your training. Naruko blinked and looked up sharply, surprised by the mention. I already told you about your final test, Mito continued. Naruko nodded. She remembered, she had to climb a towering tree in an area where her body would feel 5 times heavier than normal. Just thinking about it made her want to lay her head down on the table. Honestly, sitting without effort sounded pretty appealing. There are 3 more tests you must complete before then. During training today, you may find it more difficult to control your chakra. Naruko's eyes widened. The pain will interfere with your focus and control. Your first test is to perform the Kawarimi no Jutsu. You have 7 days to relearn it. Naruko looked confused. Will it really be that hard? That technique was the first one she had ever mastered. The idea that she might need 7 days to perform it again felt a little discouraging. That will depend on you, Mito said simply. The following week, you'll take a test on the Henge no Jutsu, and the week after that, the Bunshine no Jutsu. Naruko frowned. Can I do the Cage Bunshine no Jutsu instead? Mito shook her head. But I could never get the regular clone technique to work. You've learned several chakra control methods since graduation. Have you tried it again recently? Naruko hesitated. No. Then I expect it mastered within 21 days. Naruko frowned again. What if I can't? If you complete each of your exams on time, I'll reward you. Perhaps even with a new ninjutsu technique, Mito offered with a small smile. Naruko perked up at the idea of learning a new jutsu. However, if you're not ready on the day of the test, I'll have to assign additional training. Understood? Naruko gave a small nod, wincing from a muscle cramp. When you're finished eating, you'll run the obstacle course again. Naruko nodded slowly and returned to her breakfast. Soon, she found herself outside, standing in front of the obstacle course she had enjoyed just the day before. On Mito's signal, she took off. She climbed the tall rope, crawled under the netting, hopped between uneven stepping stones, dived through a tunnel, dodged swinging sandbags, scaled a rocky wall, balanced on a narrow beam, and leapt over a pit that someone had thoughtfully included in the middle of the track. It took her 10 minutes to complete it and return to Mito. Run it again, Mito instructed. Naruko sighed but nodded. She repeated the entire course, climbing the rope, crawling under the netting, hopping over the stones, diving through the tunnel, avoiding sandbags, climbing the wall, balancing, and jumping the pit again. Another 10 minutes passed. Run it again, Mito said once more. The boy looked at her with frustration. How many times are you going to make me run this course? Mito's eyes narrowed with calm authority. Until you stop using improper language. Are you going to ignore my instructions? Naruko took a cautious step back, recalling the girl's serious words from the day before. I expect you to follow every direction I give. If you don't, I will no longer consider you my student. Naruko shook her head quickly. No, Mito-sensei. And with that, Naruko returned to the challenging course once again. She had a feeling this was going to be a very long day. The days passed much the same way. Each one brought more training, and Naruko's muscles ached with the effort. She found herself hoping each day would end quickly, though that didn't make Mito's lectures any easier to sit through, especially since they often ended with Naruko needing to dodge soft training tools flying in her direction. Still, when they moved on to meditation at the end of the day, Naruko was truly grateful. That night, she made her way back to her room, moving slowly from the soreness in her legs. Just as she reached for the bathroom door, Mito appeared once again. She had changed out of her training gear and now wore a soft pink robe. Naru-chan, I imagine it's a little difficult to clean up properly with how tired you must be. Would you like some help? Naruko's cheeks turned red at the idea. After quickly shaking her head, she looked down at the floor, trying to hide her flustered expression. Mito gave a calm nod. Very well. I'll check on your condition later, to make sure your muscles are recovering, she said before walking away. The blonde sighed and leaned her forehead against the wall. This is going to be a challenge. Dash. 21 days before the finals. 9 days after Mito had returned to the village, Hiruzen finally found time in his schedule to visit the Senju compound. The two sat beneath a cherry tree, quietly sipping tea. Not for the first time, Hiruzen admired the view. The garden is as beautiful as ever, Mito-sama. Mito smiled warmly. I agree. It's a peaceful sight. Though, I must say, the house could use some care. How long has it been since Tsunade-chan was here? Over a decade, Hiruzen replied as he took a thoughtful sip of his tea. How is young Naruko's training coming along? Just then, a loud exclamation echoed from nearby. Oh come on. Mito simply ignored it. It's going well. What Naruko may lack in polish, she more than makes up for in dedication. Her spirit is truly admirable. That's good to hear, Hiruzen said with a small smile. What exactly is she doing at the moment? Mito glanced in Naruko's direction. She's in the middle of a test. She's required to continuously perform the substitution jutsu for an hour. That was the short explanation. The full details were much more involved. This is impossible. And tiring. Hiruzen gave a thoughtful nod. The exam statistics for the Chunin hopefuls are in. Officially, Naruko has been given 50-1 odds against Neji. But I've known Naruko long enough to believe her chances are far greater than those numbers suggest. I think a few people are going to be surprised during the Chunin exams. Mito's expression shifted into a disapproving frown. That would be a good lesson for them. Hiruzen took a calming breath. Mito had little patience for gambling, possibly even less than she had for reckless behavior. Clearing his throat, he moved on. There's something I wanted to ask you. Since your return, have you had many interactions with others? Mito tilted her head thoughtfully. Not a great number. But I suppose that depends on what you consider many. Have you told anyone your full name? Mito thought back. A receptionist at the hot springs, a few shopkeepers, and Hiruzen's friendly assistant. I've only used my first name. Good, he said with a nod. I've discussed this with Homura and Koharu. We all believe it's best to keep your return private. Mito's brow furrowed. You want me to keep it a secret? The old man nodded seriously. Would you prefer everyone knew you found a way to turn back the clock, so to speak? As she considered the implications, Mito realized that public knowledge of her appearance might draw unwanted attention. Even if others couldn't recreate her father's work, they might still try. What would you have me say, then? Simple. You and your mother escaped Uzoshio. After her passing, you came to the Hidden Leaf. Senju Mito was your great-aunt, which explains your name and resemblance. Mito gave a small nod. It sounds reasonable. It's the easiest way to keep things uncomplicated, Hiruzen agreed. The red-haired teen put down her teacup and bowed slightly. On another note, I would like to formally offer my skills in Fuinjutsu to the village. That was actually one of the main reasons Hiruzen had come to see her. Having someone with Mito's sealing expertise reviewing and enhancing the village's protective wards was a rare opportunity. Would credit be acceptable as compensation? He asked. With the Chunin exams underway, it's difficult to offer full payment in actual currency at the moment. After taking a long sip of her tea, Mito replied, credit is fine. He nodded appreciatively. But another thought concerned him. Do you need funds immediately? My situation isn't critical. But I'll need to replenish my savings eventually. I had considered borrowing from the Senju accounts. Hiruzen nearly dropped his tea, but I decided against it. He relaxed, though cautiously. It's Tsunade's inheritance, and taking from it didn't feel right, she added. Hiruzen gave a small nod, agreeing with her sentiment. However, Mito continued, glancing at the worn house, I believe Tsunade would want her home taken care of. I'll use some of the funds for necessary repairs. This time, when Hiruzen nearly choked on his tea, Mito noticed. You did bring the Senju account records, correct? With a heavy sigh, Hiruzen retrieved a manila folder and placed it on the table. The truth is, he began as Mito opened the file, there is nothing left in the Senju accounts. The Uzumaki's eyes widened in surprise as she quickly began flipping through the folder. How is this even possible? There's no way Lady Tsunade could have used up so many resources in just 24 years. It wasn't a reflection of Tsunade's responsibility, but rather the immense wealth and holdings of the Senju clan. Even the liquid assets alone should have been enough to support a small family comfortably for decades, and Tsunade was the only known Senju still alive. Mito's eyes scanned page after page of the report she was handed. One large transaction after another had been withdrawn from the clan's accounts. What could she have spent it all on? It couldn't have been her home. Actually, she spent it in just 10 years, the man thought silently. But Mito didn't need to hear that just yet. The truth is. The old man began with a sigh, after you left. Tsunade developed a habit of high-stakes gambling. He hesitated, beads of sweat forming. And unfortunately, she wasn't particularly good at it. Mito stared at him in stunned silence. Meanwhile, Naruko instinctively activated her substitution technique and shifted away from Mito and Hiruzen's line of sight. Tilda. After finishing her written exam, Naruko was surprised not to see either Hiruzen or Mito around. She wandered the compound for a few minutes before entering the kitchen, where she found Mito. Her nose twitched, and she had to fight the urge to gag. Did the old man leave? Mito nodded, looking distant. She was cooking something, but she wasn't really paying attention to what was in the pan. Oh. Okay. I finished the exam. She nodded again. I knew you would. It had been clear from the start that Naruko wouldn't struggle with the test. Mito had allowed her to go through with it anyway, thinking the practice would help. Lunch will be ready soon. We'll talk about your reward then. Go wash up. Naruko sighed softly. All right. Hey, just so you know. Those noodles are, kind of turning black. And there's a little flame. Startled, Mito looked down. Oh dear, looks like I overcooked them. No kidding, Naruko thought to herself. Mito gave her a sheepish smile. You've been doing great lately, how about we eat out today instead? Naruko beamed. Tilda. Hey, I've got a question, Naruko said, her mouth still half full of noodles. The two had gone to Ichiraku's ramen on Naruko's suggestion. I saw a girl during the preliminaries using a sealing scroll. She activated it and weapons just kept appearing in her hands, one at a time. Mito nodded, yes. She waited, unsure of the question. But why didn't all the weapons come out at once? There's a specific symbol that can be added to a sealing formula, Mito explained, it controls the order in which sealed items appear. I'll show it to you when we're back at the compound. Naruko nodded and turned back to her bowl of ramen. Ayame was apparently out on an errand, so it was just Tucci working the stand. The chef gave Naruko the same odd, overly encouraging look she'd seen before from another ramen vendor on a past trip. Seriously, how do you give someone a thumbs up with just your eyes? Naruko was still wondering when a familiar voice greeted her. Hey Naruko, how's it going? She turned and lit up. Iruka-sensei. What's up? She quickly gestured to Mito beside her. Mito-sensei, this is Iruka-sensei, he used to teach me at the academy. Then she turned back to Iruka with a grin. Mito-sensei's been helping me train for the finals. I heard you made it all the way through. Congratulations, Naruko. Iruka smiled, though he cast a slightly puzzled glance at the red-haired girl beside her. She looked young, too young to have been a former student. Where's Kakashi? He wondered silently. Mito returned the look with a polite but calm expression. She knew of Naruko's struggles in the academy and had often suspected her education had been tampered with. She wasn't sure whether Iruka had played a role or not. You doing okay, Naruko? Iruka asked kindly. You look a little tired. Naruko rubbed the back of her head with a small laugh. Yeah. The training's been intense. And exhausting, she thought, though she didn't say it aloud. But I'm learning a lot and getting stronger. That's great to hear. Iruka turned to Mito. So, you're the one helping her train? She nodded. It's been a pleasure working with her, she said with a sip of tea. Iruka eyed her carefully. You're pretty young to be tutoring someone, aren't you? Mito calmly set her cup down and replied, do you believe skill is determined by age? He blushed and laughed nervously. Sorry. That's not what I meant. She studied him for another moment, then seemed to relax. Whatever doubts she had before about him vanished. From their interaction, she could see clearly now, they were like family. With that thought, the atmosphere in the small shop warmed. Tilda. After lunch, the two said goodbye to Iruka and returned home. Mito asked Naruko what reward she'd like for completing her first exam. Unsurprisingly, Naruko asked for a powerful jutsu, something flashy with big bursts of energy. Mito gently explained that any advanced technique would take months of practice, especially since it would require a deep understanding of her elemental nature. Instead, she offered to help Naruko learn about her elemental affinity, a step that would eventually help with those powerful jutsu, even if not right away. Naruko considered it, but then asked if Mito could teach her a jutsu they discussed early on, the Shadow Shuriken technique. To her surprise, Naruko found it somewhat similar to the Shadow Clone technique she already knew, and with some practice, she managed to pick it up by the end of the day. 19 days before the finals. 2 days after their conversation with Hiruzen, a pair of Onbu arrived at the compound gates. They presented a scroll identifying them as Mito's escort to the hospital. Naruko watched the scene from a short distance. What's going on? Mito glanced over while rolling up the scroll. I've volunteered to assist with some of the sealing arrays around Konoha, under the Hokage's directive. Naruko tilted her head in curiosity. Like traps? Not exactly, Mito replied with a thoughtful frown. I'll likely be away for short periods over the next few days. Would you like to come along this time? She doubted she would get another opportunity to bring Naruko if future tasks were in more secure or sensitive locations. Naruko gave a casual shrug. Together, the four of them headed to Konoha's hospital and entered one of the medical rooms. You see, Naruko, Mito explained, doctors use a variety of tools for their work. One of the most important is medicine, essentially an advanced form of herbalism. They also use surgical instruments and specialized machines. But those trained in medical ninjutsu, or Iryo ninjutsu, can also make use of sealing arrays? Naruko cut in. Mito smiled and nodded. Yes. These arrays can enhance medical techniques by fine-tuning healing chakra or by creating synergy among multiple medical nin. She pointed to the large array painted on the floor. This one is designed for collaboration. The observing doctor was quietly impressed by Mito's quick understanding of the array's function. Take a good look at this array, Mito said. Now, let me show you everything that could be improved. The doctor was surprised as she began speaking in another language, and even more surprised when Naruko seemed to understand. The two Onbu nearby simply watched the scene in silence. After about an hour, Mito finished her evaluation and asked to move on to the next room. As they walked, Naruko ran into a classmate, someone Mito assumed was a friend. She entered the next room while Naruko stayed back for a moment. After a while, Naruko waved to get her attention. Mind if I go visit someone? She noticed the mischievous glint in Naruko's eyes but didn't take it too seriously. Of course not. Go ahead. Naruko and the other student hurried off. Without needing to explain this array like before, Mito finished much quicker. Just as she was preparing to move to the next room, a rather energetic man approached her. His eyebrows were unforgettable. Pardon the interruption. I heard a skilled sealing specialist was helping improve our hospital arrays, he said respectfully. Mito nodded slowly. He introduced himself as Mito Guy, one of Konoha's elite jonin and sensei to a Jinan who had been injured during the Chunin exams. He hoped the improved seals might aid in the student's recovery. Although Mito clarified she wasn't a medical nin, she agreed to take a look out of professional courtesy and curiosity. The Jinan guy mentioned apparently couldn't mold chakra, which intrigued her. They were discussing the matter when both suddenly paused. Guy rushed down the hallway, and Mito followed close behind. They entered a hospital room. Inside, Naruko, Guy, and her classmate stood near another young boy in bed. Across from them stood a red-haired ninja from Suna, carrying a gourd. It took Mito only a moment to sense something unusual about the Suna nin. She observed him carefully. The boy, Gaara, turned to leave the room. One day, he will acknowledge me, he said, quietly and firmly. And so will anyone else who doubts me. He passed Mito without another word. Naruko and Mito didn't discuss the encounter until they returned to the Senju estate. Once home, Naruko broke the silence. That guy. He felt like me. He was, Mito replied gently. Another person burdened with something deep, something she too felt partially responsible for, in some way. Naruko scratched her head thoughtfully. He has a sister and a brother. Oh? Naruko nodded. Yeah, they're on his team. I've always wondered what it would be like to have siblings. I thought maybe things would feel less lonely with family around. Mito gave a quiet, wistful smile. I wish it were always that simple. She knew from experience that even siblings couldn't guarantee comfort or closeness. Do you want to talk about it? Naruko shook her head. Nah. I just want to get back to training. Mito nodded and watched her walk away. 15 days before the finals. After another private meeting with Hiruzen, where she was briefly blindfolded for security reasons before being allowed into a restricted area to evaluate a set of advanced arrays, Mito returned to the Senju estate. She found Naruko in the training yard, delivering a punch to one of the wooden dummies. The next moment, Naruko spun into a roundhouse kick. Crack! Mito's eyes widened as Naruko's leg broke through the dummy. The blonde carefully pulled her leg back and winced. That is impressive. Startled by the voice, Naruko turned around. Oh, hey, Mito-sensei. She glanced at the broken dummy and gave a sheepish smile. Guess I should stop using the old training gear, huh? Mito shook her head. Believe me, the wood used here isn't easy to damage. You've grown strong. Naruko's expression brightened. You really think so? Mito nodded. I've only seen a few people manage to break one of those without using chakra, and they were much older than you. Awesome. Mito added, still, you need to refine your style. Strength alone isn't everything. Speed and accuracy are just as important. If you can't reach your target, it won't matter how strong you are. Naruko frowned slightly. Can I spar with you again? Despite all their previous training, she had yet to land a single hit on Mito. She understood more than ever how much faster she needed to become. Mito tilted her head. How are you feeling? Actually, I feel a lot better. Once again, Naruko gave the girl a cheerful smile. Still kind of sore, but not nearly as bad as before. I think I'm starting to get used to it. Mito nodded approvingly, pleased that Naruko was beginning to adapt to keeping the first gate open. The Hyuga fighting style, the gentle fist, is all about precision and speed. Pure strength doesn't mean much to someone who uses it. So from now on, you'll be training against someone who's quick. Naruko raised an eyebrow. Who? She had gotten used to sparring with Mito, and Mito was already fast. She hadn't even managed to land a hit on her yet. Tell me, Naru-chan, have you heard of the summoning technique? Naruko crossed her arms and closed her eyes in thought. Iruka-sensei mentioned it at the academy. She stayed silent for a few seconds. Mito nodded. Go on. Naruko shrugged. That's pretty much all I remember. The girl sighed gently. The summoning technique is a space-time ninjutsu. It allows the user to bring another creature from a distant location to their side. Most people use it to summon animals they've made a contract with, though technically it's possible to summon people too. You can summon other people? Yes, but it requires a special tag, and it only works at close range. The Hokage sometimes uses it to quickly bring Onbu members to him. Still, when you hear someone is about to use a summoning, they're probably calling on a creature they've bonded with. Mito pricked her finger and performed a series of hand signs. Summoning technique. A puff of smoke burst out in front of her. When it cleared, a small white rabbit appeared. The rabbit wore a black strip of cloth tied around its head like a mini blindfold, with 2 eye holes cut into it. This is Haruyuki, Mito said. I have a contract with a clan of rabbits, and he'll be your sparring partner. Naruko blinked at the tiny creature and tilted her head. You want me to spar with this little guy? He looks like he'd blow away in a breeze. This time, it was Haruyuki whose eye twitched. Watch it, kid. I'm not as delicate as I look. Oh really? Naruko smirked. You want to prove it? Haruyuki growled. Bring it on. Mito rubbed her temple and held up a hand. Enough. Settle this with a taijutsu match. You begin in 3, 2, 1. Go. The result of the match was something Naruko would never speak of. Even with the increased speed from opening the first gate, she couldn't match Haruyuki's movements. The rabbit bounced around her like a blur, knocking her off balance with well-placed taps and quick kicks. The match ended when Haruyuki lightly tapped her forehead, sending her tumbling. He landed gracefully on her stomach, giggling triumphantly. Mito, not surprised in the slightest, crouched beside Naruko. Haruyuki is the fastest of his clan. If you can keep up with him, you'll be more than ready for your upcoming exams. Naruko got up, brushing herself off while glaring at the rabbit. Haruyuki responded by crossing his arms and turning his head with exaggerated sass. Maybe try chasing him around the compound for speed training. Haruyuki turned to Mito, clearly unamused. You want her to chase me? That's so humiliating. Naruko pulled out a kunai, her tone playful. Can I at least slow him down a little? Mito sighed as the banter started again. 14 days before the finals. After a long session discussing sealing techniques with Hiruzen, Mito returned to the Senju compound. As she wandered through, she spotted Naruko training in the same spot as the day before. This time, Naruko was throwing kunai at a wooden target, though her aim was far from perfect. She let out a groan of frustration. Just like her taijutsu, her form needed work. It was something Mito had been helping her improve for a while. Naruko lifted another kunai, carefully gauging the target before letting it fly. It hit the dummy's shoulder. Better, Mito commented, causing Naruko to jump slightly. But you're still holding it wrong. She stepped behind Naruko and gently adjusted her arm. Place your hand here. Then she tapped Naruko's leg. And keep your stance open like this. Now aim and throw. Naruko took a deep breath, focused, and threw again. This time, the kunai hit closer to the center. Excellent, Mito nodded. Naruko huffed, still frowning. I like the Fuma Shuriken more. Mito raised a brow. Considering your fondness for explosive notes, I'd recommend improving your kunai throwing. It's difficult to safely attach those to a Fuma Shuriken. Naruko thought that was unfortunate. An exploding giant shuriken sounded fun. Why not? Because detonating large pieces of metal can send sharp fragments flying in unpredictable directions. That's less of a risk with smaller weapons like kunai. Mito pulled one out and threw it slightly off target. Then she performed 3 hand seals. Manipulating attack blades technique. The kunai curved midair and struck the dummy right in the center. Whoa, Naruko blinked. How'd you do that? It's a basic ninjutsu. It allows you to guide a projectile with your chakra after throwing it. You can't fully control it, and once the weapon slows down, it stops responding. Can you teach me? Mito smiled. You have a little test today. Pass it, and I'll show you. Naruko perked up. Is it the transformation technique test? Yes. You'll need to maintain the transformation while going through your regular training for 1 hour. Take the form of your sensei, Kakashi. Alright. Naruko formed a hand seal and vanished in a puff of smoke. In her place stood a version of Kakashi, though not a very convincing one. Mito raised a brow. I think something's off. She pulled out a small mirror. Kakashi looked like she hadn't slept in days. The headband was on the wrong side, the visible eye was droopy, the clothes were faded, and somehow, the hair was green. Naruko grinned sheepishly. Oops. Mito looked unimpressed. Naruko quickly tried again. This time, her transformation was much better. A solid copy of Kakashi looked back at her. Mito nodded. Now, the obstacle course. Naruko, still in Kakashi's form, ran the course. She climbed ropes, crawled under wires, hopped between stones, and dashed through a tunnel, emerging on the other side back in her own form. She blinked, then looked down at her hands and clothes, surprised the transformation had dropped. She felt a strong presence to her side and slowly turned to find Mito looking right at her. Naruko chuckled awkwardly. Hey! Whoops! You failed, Mito said calmly. Can I try again? If this were a mission, there wouldn't be second chances. Mito's tone was firm. I did warn you there would be consequences. Naruko gulped. What kind of consequences? Mito had never officially taken on students, though she had guided the training of several over the years. Most spoke highly of her methods. Mito always maintained clear expectations in her training programs, expectations that were fair but firm. When one of her trainees fell short, she was quick to come up with a creative way to reinforce the lesson. Some might even call her methods a little intense. An hour later, Naruko stood in the changing room on the women's side of the hot springs. She was currently using a transformation technique, appearing as a young girl with black hair, carefully crafted to look nothing like her real self. You want me to bathe on the women's side of the hot springs? She asked, puzzled. Mito nodded, her gaze calm but serious. You mentioned the discomfort has passed. That suggests your setback earlier wasn't due to chakra control, but rather a lack of focus. This will help you learn to concentrate more effectively. Naruko tilted her head. But what does that have to do with the hot springs? Incentive, Mito replied simply. When we met at the springs before, I noticed there's a special discount for kunoichi on Fridays. That means many of the village's female shinobi will be there today. She narrowed her eyes. I imagine they wouldn't be too happy if they found someone pretending to sneak in. Naruko groaned, recalling how the conversation had gone. Arguing with Mito had proven to be useless. In the end, Mito had only needed to ask whether she planned to disobey a direct instruction. That had ended the conversation quickly. To make matters more stressful, Mito had mentioned she wouldn't intervene if anything went wrong. Naruko's final concern had been moral. She asked if it was really okay to enter the women's bath under such circumstances. Mito acknowledged the concern. That's fair, she said. Naruko had sighed with relief, until Mito added, you will pretend to be blind and keep your eyes closed the entire time. Naruko facepalmed. And if you even try to peek, I will personally cancel your transformation. Now, Naruko stood nervously, wrapped only in a towel. Her female form was convincing, and she'd tied her black hair into a loose bun. Mito appeared beside her, dressed similarly, her long red hair pinned up elegantly. Naruko turned slightly red upon seeing her mentor, but quickly shut her eyes. Mito gently ran a hand over Naruko's eyes. Keep them closed, she instructed, then took Naruko's hand and guided her toward the springs. Naruko focused on maintaining the transformation jutsu. The shift in air and the warm moisture told her they had entered the bathing area. The sound of cheerful voices told her that Mito had been correct, many kunoichi were already enjoying the bath. With Mito seated next to her, Naruko simply concentrated on staying calm and focused. It was just 1 hour, and she felt confident she could manage. It's not any different from the regular bathhouse, she thought, trying to stay calm. Then, from nearby, hey Chie-chan, could you help me with some lotion? Naruko twitched slightly but kept her eyes shut. It's fine. Just ignore it. Focus. Sure, but you'll have to take the towel off. Still fine. Just noise. Focus. Should I do your front too? Yes, but go a little firmer this time. Naruko tried very hard not to react. Just ignore it. This is just another part of the challenge. Behind her, she heard a familiar giggle. Then came a splash to her right. Mito had apparently stood up. Stay here a moment. I'll be right back, Mito said. Naruko wasn't sure what was happening until. Ah! That startled scream sounded oddly like the one she remembered from the time they'd crossed paths with that strange frog summoner. Intruder! Intruder! Mito's voice rang out. There was a sudden rush of water as multiple women exited the springs. Though Naruko kept her eyes shut, she could practically feel the energy in the air. She had no doubt that every one of those kunoichi was on high alert. Trying to ignore the commotion, Naruko repeated a calming mantra in her head. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. Eventually, the hour passed, and Mito returned. The two of them quietly exited the hot springs, lesson complete. 7 days before the finals. Naruko performed the Bunshin no Jutsu flawlessly. Mito eventually taught her the Sashujin no Jutsu as well. That was all. 5 days before the finals. Naruko once asked Haruyuki why he wore a mask around his eyes. The rabbit explained that it helped him keep his identity private while among humans. Naruko found the idea amusing. In return, Haruyuki asked Naruko why she wore such a bright orange outfit. She answered cheerfully that orange was the coolest color and she wanted people to notice her. Haruyuki couldn't help but laugh. The rabbit didn't always understand humans. Even Mito Haim, who had been part of his clan for nearly a century, remained a mystery. After Naruko's bold answer, Haruyuki had come to believe she was a little unpredictable. As part of their training, Haruyuki and Naruko often chased each other through the treetops, dodging obstacles and traps Mito had cleverly placed. Though Naruko had yet to catch the speedy rabbit, she was getting faster and more agile with every attempt. Today, Naruko was only a few jumps behind him. Haruyuki smirked and deliberately slowed his pace. A moment later, Naruko closed the distance. Gotcha! She called. Nice try. Haruyuki leapt high into the air, adding a flip for good measure, and continued his zigzag pattern through the trees. Try to keep up. I will. Just you wait, bunny. Haruyuki briefly dropped into the lower branches before continuing. Naruko followed, bouncing skillfully between limbs. Though her bright outfit made her easy to spot, it also made her movement look more dynamic. Even Mito's trained eyes couldn't help but be drawn to her. To Haruyuki's surprise, Naruko managed to get directly above him and pounced. Just as Haruyuki dodged again, a glint of light from a nearby trap caught his attention. Kunai flew toward him from a hidden mechanism. He prepared to dodge, but Naruko suddenly jumped between him and the kunai, using her own weapon to deflect the projectiles. When it was over, she turned and smiled. There was concern in her eyes. Haruyuki blinked. He glanced toward Mito, who looked just as surprised. Naruko should not have been able to move that fast, at least not based on the last 10 days of training. It made no sense. And yet, here she was. Haruyuki crossed his arms with a huff. You didn't have to do that. I could have dodged it. Naruko's smile brightened. Better safe than sorry, she replied, clearly proud of her quick thinking. She then turned and examined the trap mechanism with interest. Mito stepped forward to join her, her expression thoughtful. The rabbit continued observing the girl for several moments before coming to an insightful realization about the blonde. It was more of a hypothesis than a certainty. Naruko had intentionally worn her orange outfit to draw attention. The outfit attracted everyone's gaze, including potential enemies. She seemed to walk around deliberately with a figurative target on her back. But why? Perhaps it was to distract attention away from those around her? The rabbit shook its head thoughtfully. It was an intriguing thought. He wondered if her teammates truly appreciated the gesture. You created a seal that fires kunai? Mito, who had been about to comment on Naruko's surprising speed, shook her head. It's an altered weapon sealing array. I sealed kunai into the array and set it to launch them the moment someone steps into range. Naruko turned back to the array. Can you show me which part triggers the kunai launch? The redhead crouched next to Naruko, tracing different symbols. This character is part of a weapon seal. If you attach it to this symbol, you can launch anything sealed within. She traced down to the bottom of the array. This part here is the trap mechanism I mentioned earlier. She drew an imaginary character between two others. If you added this character and erased this one, you could seal an offensive elemental ninjutsu and launch it as a trap. Naruko squinted, crossing her arms thoughtfully. Can I use the forge? The forge wasn't a typical blacksmith's workspace. It was actually the nickname Naruko had given to a room where Mito kept a large armory of weapons and a variety of funjutsu reagents. Naruko had used the room before, mainly for creating explosive tags, her first and only creation so far. You may, Mito said with a nod. Tell me, what are you planning to craft? I'd rather not say just yet. Can you give me some time? Though Mito's curiosity was piqued, she chose to respect Naruko's wishes. As Naruko left the room, Haruyuki walked up to Mito. So, am I done? It would seem so, Mito replied, kneeling to ruffle his head. Please give my best to Kuroyukimi. After the rabbit disappeared, Mito returned inside the house. Hiruzen had asked her to review another security seal, and she decided she had the time to do so. Besides, staying busy would help keep her mind off of Naruko's secret project. She sat in what had become her study over the past few weeks when she began sensing Naruko's chakra. Mito wasn't a sensor type, so the only way she should have been able to sense what Naruko was doing was if she were using a jutsu nearby, which she wasn't, or if she were expelling an enormous amount of chakra. That only deepened Mito's curiosity. While contemplating whether the seals on the compound's walls were designed to hide Naruko's chakra output from the village, Naruko entered the room. Naru-chan, how did your new idea go? Naruko grinned widely. The girl frowned at the answer, though. I don't want to say just yet, Naruko replied. Mito opened her mouth to say something but was interrupted by a spike of chakra from the direction of the forge. If you don't mind, I want to keep it a surprise for the finals. I'm pretty sure no one's done it before, and I want to be the one to name it, Naruko continued, running a hand through her hair. Something really cool, and with the name Uzumaki in it. Mito frowned at Naruko's words but nodded. If you want to keep it a secret, I won't press you. However, she turned toward the direction of the forge. May I ask what is happening in that room? Naruko kept grinning. I've got some clones working on something. Mito raised an eyebrow. Shadow clones? Naruko nodded before turning to leave. I'm going to train some more. Mito sighed, focusing back on her notes, but she knew she would struggle to concentrate until Naruko revealed her secret. In the end, Mito couldn't help but wonder what Naruko was working on. 2 days before the finals. Mito woke up early as usual, following her routine and getting dressed in her typical training outfit. As she went to check on Naruko, she was surprised to find her room empty. A quick walk around the house confirmed that Naruko wasn't around. When Mito walked past the kitchen, she noticed some freshly washed dishes sitting in the drying rack next to the sink. It was the first time since they began their training that Naruko had woken up earlier than her. Mito turned toward the front door, half expecting to find Naruko training with a clone, as she had often seen before. She opened the door, stepped outside, and scanned the area. Then, she heard a strange whistling sound, one that she recognized as metal cutting through the air. Mito tensed up and turned to see an object flying toward her. Though she calculated the trajectory, she still flinched when a kunai with an orange tassel embedded itself into the ground right next to her. Mito smiled and looked up at the top of a nearby sequoia tree, where she spotted Naruko lounging in a branch near the top. Though she doubted Naruko could hear her, Mito clapped her hands in appreciation. Up in the tree, Naruko cupped her hand around her mouth and called down. More weight. She wasn't sure if Mito heard her, and silently hoped she hadn't taken her seriously. Naruko leaned back against the tree and sighed. Neji is going down. 1 day before the final. So by the end of Hiru-chan's little experiment, she and her 2 teammates were bald, in their undergarments, and covered in honey. Mito and Naruko were both laughing by the end of the story. Naruko chuckled, all that, because the old man wanted to learn how to use a sword? Hiru-chan has refused to pick up a katana since that day. Naruko snickered, greatest story ever. She would definitely remember that one. Dusk approached on the last day before the finals of the Chunin exams. Though Naruko had done some training earlier, Mito insisted she take it easy for the rest of the day. Mito called her inside hours before sunset, advising that she would benefit more from resting for the remainder of the day. After washing up, Naruko joined Mito for dinner. They had ordered out, a large meal at that. Naruko took another bite of ramen. While it wasn't as great as Ichiraku's, she had yet to find a place that could compare, but it was still quite good. Never knew the old man had a wild side when he was a kid. Oh, you would be quite surprised how often respectable figures had a wild side in their youth. Mito raised her cup of tea to hide her growing smile. You wish to become Hokage in the future, do you not? Naruko nodded, though Mito didn't wait for a response. I am sure that some child in the future would be surprised to learn that you painted graffiti over the Hokage's monument when you were just 12 years old. Mito sipped her tea with a knowing smile. Naruko blushed and rubbed the back of her head. Yeah. I guess. Mito placed her cup down. You know, you actually remind me of someone I knew when I was just a little girl. Do I? Mito's expression became distant. She was a dear friend of mine growing up. She was. Very excitable. Naruko raised an eyebrow. Now that I think about it, you've never really talked about your family. Mito gave Naruko a thoughtful look. My childhood wasn't very exciting. My father was the leader of the Uzumaki clan. My mother died when I was young, so I didn't know her too well. I had an older brother who succeeded my father as the clan leader. My childhood was spent learning the shinobi arts. Naruko grinned. You wanted to be a ninja? Mito shook her head. Not exactly. What I truly wanted was to become skilled enough to defend both my home and myself, should the need arise. I had no desire to leave my village to sell my skills. Mito looked away briefly. After my training, my father placed me in the village's defense corps. Afterwards, I spent my time studying Fuinjutsu. Did Uzushio have its own academy? Mito shook her head again. No. Each prospective shinobi was trained by a relative. However, my father did design and fund certain exercises that shinobi hopefuls could participate in. She stared at Naruko for a moment. It was at one of those exercises that I met that friend I mentioned before. They divided all of the children into two teams. One side protected a VIP, while the other side tried to defeat or capture her. Naruko caught her choice of words. You? Indeed, Mito nodded. I was the one chosen to be the VIP. Kurohoshi, my friend's name, was on the opposing side. My group was forced to stay in the open, while Kurohoshi's team was advised to stay in the shadows. Mito tried to hide her smile. Instead, Kurohoshi climbed to the highest building in the area, shouted his name, and declared that he would defeat me. Mito laughed softly at the memory. The guards, the other students, were on him in moments. But I was so awestruck by his bravado that I decided to fight him myself. The match, as you can imagine, was short and, well, not exactly in his favor. Naruko thought back to Kakashi's bell test. Yeah. That sounds like something I would do. Mito's quiet giggle turned into loud laughter, and Naruko joined in as well. After a while, Mito regained control of her laughter. I believe we are supposed to be talking strategy. Her comment sobered Naruko up. Your first opponent is from the Hyuga clan. They excel at close quarters combat. Your best chance would be to keep them at a distance. Naruko shrugged as she downed another rice ball. I'm not worried. I know how to handle them. Mito frowned, concerned. May I ask how? Naruko grinned. It's a secret. Your mystery weapon, then? Naruko's grin widened. Mito sighed. Though not your immediate concern, I do believe this Sabaku no Gaara will be your most dangerous opponent. Naruko sighed at the thought of Gaara. Yeah. He has that sand defense thing that blocks every attack that tries to hit him. Fuzzy brows could barely touch him. She then flashed Mito a mischievous grin. I'm thinking of hitting him with 208 exploding kunai. Kind of curious to see if he can block that. Mito shuddered at the thought of such a large number of explosives. She wasn't entirely comfortable with Naruko, or anyone, carrying that kind of arsenal. There are methods to defeat a Jinchuriki using Fuinjutsu, though the techniques are far too advanced for you to learn just yet. Naruko shrugged. No big deal. I'm just excited to show everyone that the Uzumaki clan is still as powerful as ever. Mito's eyes widened at the comment, but after a moment, she smiled. Naruko, I couldn't help but notice your outfit is in tatters. Naruko walked back into the room wearing a completely new outfit. Her orange jacket was replaced with a red, sleeveless, high-collared jacket. Her orange pants and blue shinobi sandals were replaced with black-colored ones. She also wore a pair of black, fingerless gloves. A spiral design adorned the back of her jacket, black on the jacket and red on the gloves. Her Hittite 8 was still wrapped around her forehead. Mito examined her closely. When we first moved in here, I found one of our clan's old uniforms in storage. I gave it to a tailor and asked him to alter it to your size. Naruko was still looking herself over. So this is one of our clan's uniforms? Mito pursed her lips. Not exactly. The tailor took some creative liberty and turned it into what you're wearing now. Just as well, I suppose. I don't think Uzushio's heavy armor would have been much use to you. Certainly not against your first opponent and probably not against the others. She caught Naruko's eyes. How do you like it? It looks cool, and it's super light too. But. Naruko blushed. It's not orange. Mito bit back a snort and spoke gently. Forgive me, but I didn't take your favorite color into account when I commissioned this outfit. She got a distant look in her eyes. Red and black were common colors for our village's shinobi force. She gestured to herself. Mito was wearing a black top and a red and black plaid skirt, the same outfit Naruko had seen her wear when they first met. My own attire reflects that tradition, call it a sense of nationalism if you will. Naruko grew nervous. Didn't the first Hokage wear a red and black outfit? Mito frowned. Though his clan used similar armor, his was actually a gift from our clan for our engagement. I specifically asked for those colors. His brother's armor was also a gift from us, though I asked for Tobirama's to be blue. Oh, is blue your favorite color or something? No, quite the opposite actually. Naruko resisted the urge to smile. Mito hadn't hidden her disapproval of Tobirama. Not in the slightest. The redhead gave Naruko a slight nod. Tomorrow, you will be judged on many factors, not just your combat skills. Entering a battle with torn clothing won't give the best impression. Simply wearing something more presentable will give you a better chance at being promoted, so please bear with it. Naruko's eyes widened, and her face turned pale. No. I didn't mean to sound ungrateful because I really do like it. I was just mentioning it. I didn't realize that red and black were common clan colors. Common colors, Mito corrected. Unless you were part of our leader's personal guard, our clan didn't have a strict dress code. I thought you could make use of it. I'm not prohibiting you from wearing orange if you prefer. The blonde shrugged. Honestly, I kind of like it though. Makes me feel like an actual member of the Uzumaki clan. Mito smiled at the comment. That probably sounds silly since you're the only person from our clan I've ever met. It doesn't sound silly at all. Naruko let out a deep breath. She clenched her fists and smiled at Mito. Yeah, I'm definitely going to do my best tomorrow. I'll make our clan proud. Mito giggled, I'm sure you will. Perhaps I should offer you a reward for defeating every opponent you face? Naruko blushed. Maybe I could offer you a new ninjutsu or perhaps lessons in elemental nature manipulation, or maybe something more tangible. How about a date? Naruko quickly interrupted. Mito's eyes widened. If I win the tournament, then how about we go out on a date? Mito's cheeks reddened. That had been a surprise. Not an unwelcome surprise, but a surprise nonetheless. She thought it over for a moment. That would be crossing a line. A line that wouldn't exist if Naruko weren't still in need of training. There was also the obvious age difference. Naruko was 13, and Mito was, chronologically, well over 100. Mito pursed her lips. That would actually be a challenge for anyone she could consider being with. And since Mito was biologically close to Naruko's age, it was likely Naruko would be the only one able to match her lifespan. Then again, Naruko was Kushina's daughter. For her part, Naruko was pale, wondering if she had crossed a line. She knew Mito had been married before, to the first Hokage. But that seemed like another time, another life. She wasn't sure if Mito was even interested in dating anyone now. Very well, Mito began, snapping Naruko out of her thoughts. If you defeat all of your opponents, then I will allow you to court me. Naruko grinned back at her. I am so going to do my best. Since they were expecting an early morning, neither of them stayed up too much longer. Day of the finals. The next day, Naruko woke up early, had a light breakfast, and left on her own to go to the arena. She was ushered into a room with most of the other contestants. Gaara was standing in the corner, with his teammates, Temari and Kankuro, standing a few feet away. Neji sat in the opposite corner, apparently trying to meditate. Shino leaned against a wall, alternating between staring at Neji, who had defeated his teammate, and staring at Kankuro, his opponent. Sasuke, Shikamaru, and Dosu were absent. Naruko decided to sit near Shino, which placed her closer to Neji than Gaara. When the finals started, they would all walk out into the center of the arena to hear the rules. Naruko thought they just wanted to put them all on display for everyone to see. However, Naruko had more important thoughts to worry about. Like where she could take a girl on a date. Ichiraku seemed too common, and a bit too casual. She hadn't gone to many restaurants since Ichiraku's was both inexpensive and delicious, so she hadn't felt the need to try others. She wasn't sure how many restaurants would welcome her. Maybe I could organize a picnic. Do girls like picnics? She knew how to cook. Tuchi, Ayame, Iruka, and even Hiruzen had taught her over the years. The main problem was figuring out a good location. The nicest place she knew was the Senju grounds, but that felt a bit uncreative. While deep in thought, Naruko didn't notice Shikamaru enter the waiting room. The Nara clan shinobi glanced around the room and immediately moved to sit between Naruko and Shino. He glanced at Naruko before resting his head against the wall and closing his eyes. Thinking about your fight? Naruko shook her head, not at all surprised when Shikamaru pulled her out of her thoughts. Nah, I'm going to win easily. She said it loud enough for Neji to hear. The Hyuga gave Naruko a hard stare before returning to his meditation. Naruko leaned closer to Shino and whispered, Hey, do you know a good place to take a girl? Shikamaru raised an eyebrow and shrugged. Why would I know that? Naruko shrugged. Where do you take Ino? Shikamaru's cheeks turned red. What makes you think I would date such a troublesome girl? Oh. I just figured. Well, you figured wrong. Shikamaru barked. Naruko raised her hands defensively. All right, geez. After giving him one last glare, Shikamaru turned away and tried to relax. Think you could ask that Suna girl for me? Shikamaru turned back to Naruko. Why would I do that? Naruko shrugged. I figured another girl would know, and you have a match with her, so. Shikamaru narrowed his eyes. Yes, Naruko, sometime between her trying to bludgeon me with that giant fan and shooting blasts of wind at me, I'll try and ask her where she likes to go on dates. Maybe while she's busy trying to defeat me, I'll compliment her on how graceful she is. That sound good to you, Naruko? Naruko blinked a few times and stared at him for several moments. Go ahead if you want, but I just need you to ask her about the date thing. Shikamaru sighed. Why does Naruko have to be so troublesome? Gambling has always been an integral part of the Chunin exams. For over 50 years, the Masaki clan, a renowned merchant family spanning across the elemental nations, has overseen the gambling operations during these exams. Although each nation's Chunin exams have slight variations, they always culminate in a one-on-one tournament-style battle. This is where the Masaki clan plays a crucial role, thoroughly researching each contestant. The contestants' villages typically provide any available, non-confidential information, which the Masaki clan uses to rank each competitor. For example, Uzumaki Naruko, Konoha Jinan. Age, 13. Sensei, Hatake Kakashi. Academy rank, lower performing in her class. Genjutsu ability, minimal. Taijutsu style, street fighter. Chakra capacity, vast. Elemental affinity, unknown, with many speculating fire. Notable skills, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Notable traits, impulsive, loyal, creative, emotional. Special notes, wears a bright orange outfit. Chunin exam notes, won her preliminary match with a surprising maneuver. And compared to Hyuga Neji, Konoha Jinan. Age, 14. Sensei, Mito Guy. Academy rank, top student. Genjutsu ability, unknown, likely immune. Taijutsu style, Juken. Chakra capacity, large. Elemental affinity, earth. Bloodline trait, Byakugan. Notable skills, Juken. Notable traits, confident, strategic, intelligent. Special notes, known as a prodigy within his clan. Chunin exam notes, won his preliminary match with ease. The odds were stacked heavily in favor of Hyuga Neji, with a 50-to-1 ratio. The Masaki clan also regulates who can place bets during the exams. For example, Mito Guy is only allowed to bet on Neji, while Hatake Kakashi can only place bets on his students, provided they aren't competing against one another. This policy helps prevent any undue influence or manipulation. One of the Masaki clan members, Naburo, was seated at a desk, taking in another bet for the upcoming match. Next, please, he called out. A man approached the desk, handing over his ID. I'd like to place a bet on Uzumaki Naruko. Naburo carefully examined the ID. Umino Iruka, the instructor of several students, including Naruko, Uchiha Sasuke, Aburame Shino, and Nara Shikamaru. Iruka was a well-liked instructor, but his connection with his students had weakened over time. It appeared that the only student he still maintained contact with was Naruko, the one he intended to place his bet on. How much would you like to wager? Naburo asked. 6,000 ryo, all on Naruko, Iruka replied. Naburo nodded. While not a massive sum, the bet was placed on the underdog. Your bet is accepted, he said, making a note in his ledger. Here's your receipt. Best of luck. Iruka smiled and walked toward the seating area. As he passed by, he noticed Naruko's new sensei sitting alone, an empty seat beside her. He made his way toward her, and as soon as she noticed him, she gave him a small smile. Hey, do you mind if I sit here? Not at all, she replied, gesturing to the empty seat. Please, have a seat. Iruka sat down and both of them turned their attention to the arena below. After a moment, Iruka noticed the receipt in his hand, and Naruko's expression changed. Are you a regular gambler, Umino-san? She asked in a neutral voice. Iruka, not catching the hint of concern in her tone, shrugged. Not really, but I know Naruko's going to win, so it's not much of a gamble. Naruko turned to him, her face lighting up with a small smile. I suppose you're right. In the arena, The match between Naruko and Neji began, with the usual pre-battle banter. The fight soon became intense, with Neji confidently declaring that Naruko was fated to lose. However, Naruko wasn't intimidated. "That same line didn't work when you used it against your cousin," she said, rolling her eyes. "And for the record, when I beat you, it won't be because of fate. It'll be because I'm simply better." Neji's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." With that, he activated his Byakugan. Naruko responded by pulling out a Fuma Shuriken, a large, multi-blade weapon. "Check this out," she grinned, holding it up. "I call it the Uzumaki Shuriken." Neji scoffed, "A Fuma Shuriken is nothing new. You haven't seen one like this," Naruko laughed. Neji shook his head and prepared to dodge, thinking the shuriken would be easy to avoid. But as Naruko tossed the weapon into the air, it began to split into smaller shurikens, each moving in different directions. Naruko smirked as she watched Neji struggle to keep up with the barrage of shadow-cloned shurikens that continuously appeared and scattered. Neji managed to block a few, but the sheer number made it difficult for him to avoid them all. Back in the stands, Mito, Naruko's teammate, watched in awe at the ingenuity of the attack. Naruko had turned an ordinary weapon into something extraordinary, cleverly using seals to release additional shurikens in rapid succession. Neji, realizing that his usual strategy wouldn't work, kept moving, dodging and blocking the shurikens as they rained down on him. He quickly realized that he was at a disadvantage as the shurikens continued to appear. Desperately, he used his Kaiden technique to protect himself from the barrage, but even that couldn't last forever. As Neji's chakra began to deplete, Naruko smirked, knowing her shuriken attack had successfully worn him down. When the barrage finally stopped, she used the moment to unleash another devastating move. Neji, struggling to keep up with the pace of the fight, was soon overwhelmed. As he attempted to recover, Naruko had already prepared her next move, and with a well-placed attack, Naruko gained the upper hand. Genma, the proctor, quickly called for the match to end as it became clear that Naruko had emerged victorious. The crowd erupted into cheers as Naruko stood tall, a wide grin on her face. "Stop!" Genma called out firmly. "The match is over. The winner is Uzumaki Naruko." The crowd roared with applause as Naruko celebrated her hard-earned victory. Meanwhile, Naruko dispelled her clones and walked over to pick up her customized Fuma Shuriken. The explosion was mostly a means to protect them from being taken and copied, not so much as an extra attack, though it did serve that purpose. However, without it, she needed to pick them up as soon as possible and seal them away from prying eyes. "At least I won't have to buy new ones." Naruko glanced at the prone body of Hyuga Neji. If her heavy breathing was anything to go by, the boy was close to chakra exhaustion. She turned back to pick up one of her shuriken. "Glad I thought up these things, they were useful." Neji scoffed, "You also gave away your greatest weapon in the first battle and wasted all of them." The blonde grinned, "First off, these things are not my greatest weapons. I actually made them 5 days ago, or something. I used them on you so people wouldn't figure out what I've actually been working on this past month." The blonde grinned at Neji's shocked expression. "Oh, and I didn't use all of my Uzumaki shurikens on you, I just didn't feel it necessary to hit you with 52 of them at the same time." 52 shuriken, plus the one she used at the beginning of the fight meant she came into the battle with 53 Uzumaki shuriken. "I also have 208 exploding kunai." 53 and 208? The blonde shrugged, "I hate round numbers." Then Naruko's smile widened, "Oh, and for my next invention, I think I'm going to pack an Uzumaki shuriken with exploding shuriken." Naruko spread her arms out, "Explosions everywhere. It's going to be so awesome." Up in the stands, though no one could actually hear the two boys' conversation, Tenten had another moment of excitement. Sadly, even though she could freely clone kunai and shuriken, the shuriken cage Bunshin no Jutsu wasn't sophisticated enough to copy any seals that happened to be on those weapons. Yet. Naruko crouched down next to Neji. "I should probably mention, you know that rule back at the academy that said we weren't allowed to have explosive tags, that rule was made for people like me." Neji shivered at the comment. "You weren't bad, by the way. It's a pity we can't be friends. It'd be great having someone like you watching my back when I become Hokage." TCH. Idiot, still thinking you got what it takes to become the Hokage. Think about it. You can give me your answer when I change your clan. Huh? Neji glared at her. What? Naruko tapped her forehead. "I kinda get the protecting your bloodline thing, all-seeing eyes, whatever, but I think that being able to hurt members of your family with a single hand sign is the most horrible thing ever, and I'm going to outlaw it." Neji stared at Naruko as if she grew a second head. The blonde shrugged, seems like slavery to me. My Konoha isn't going to be a place where slavery exists. It's as simple as that. All I ask is that you stop doing things that upset me, like hurting your cousin. Neji scowled at that. Naruko glared at Neji. She may be creepy, but she's also super nice too. Believe it or not, she actually still loves you, despite the fact that you put her in the hospital. And how would you know that? I'm empathetic, trust me. Neji scoffed. So what, I watch your back and you get rid of the caged bird seal. Naruko shook her head. No, I get rid of the caged bird seal, and that's it. At Neji's look, the blonde shrugged. Like I said, my Konoha won't be a place where people can just enslave their family. With that, Naruko got up and turned to leave. Though Naruko didn't know it at the time, and Neji wasn't prepared to admit it, at that moment, Naruko had just gained her first follower. After several intense battles, Mito watched with growing concern as the situation in front of her deteriorated. Iruka sprang to his feet, urging her to stay put before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. However, she couldn't simply stay there. Mito swiftly rose from her seat, using a genjutsu to hide her presence, and considered her options. She realized she was completely out of the loop. She had no knowledge of Konoha's defensive strategies or emergency plans. She could either attack enemy shinobi indiscriminately or try to locate and stick with people she knew personally. Hiruzen and Naruko were the most logical choices. The Sandaime Hokage had disappeared with the Kazekage near the top of the stadium. Naruko, the blonde Uzumaki, had spoken with her sensei and seemed to have gone on a mission, though Mito was unsure of the details. Despite wanting to be by Naruko's side, Mito knew she had to find Hiruzen. Naruko was still somewhat of an unknown, but the Sandaime Hokage, with his decades of leadership, was the real target of any potential threat. If the invaders had plans to target anyone, it would be Hiruzen. Mito was determined to protect him and ensure their plans failed. Miles away in the forest, Naruko, accompanied by Kakashi's dog Pakun, surveyed the battlefield. Sasuke was facing off against a dangerous figure, and Sakura appeared to be trapped by Gaara's sand. Temari, much farther away, was hiding in fear. Naruko focused her empathic abilities to gauge the situation. Sasuke was radiating anger and pride, with a hint of fear hidden underneath. Gaara was consumed by pure bloodlust. There was no reading from Sakura, which either meant she was unconscious or in serious danger. Naruko clenched her fists in anger. If anything had happened to Sakura, she wouldn't let Gaara get away with it. Temari's presence was filled with pure fear, and while that irritated Naruko, she chose to ignore her and focus on Sakura's condition. With quick movements, Naruko reached Sakura, confirming she was still breathing. The sand wrapped tightly around her seemed to make escape impossible, but Naruko wasn't about to let that stop her. With a powerful strike, she shattered the sand and freed Sakura. She quickly tossed Sakura to Sasuke and positioned herself between him and Gaara. Gaara glared at Naruko, growling, "Move aside. I'm going to defeat Uchiha Sasuke." Naruko stood firm and responded, "Don't worry about Sasuke. You'll have to deal with me first." Without hesitation, she launched a powerful kick that sent Gaara crashing to the forest floor. She followed closely, landing gracefully nearby. Her eyes locked onto Gaara, her gaze intense. "Don't think for a second that I'll let you harm him." Mito had arrived at a powerful barrier and knelt next to 7 Anbu, who were in defensive positions. Within the barrier, she saw Hiruzen, clad in battle armor, facing off against his former student, Orochimaru. The captain of the Anbu squad, a figure cloaked in white, recognized Mito as the Fun Master and asked her thoughts on the barrier. She observed it closely, noting that it incinerated anything that touched it, but she was unfamiliar with the technique. She could sense 4 different individuals fueling the barrier's power. As Mito pondered her options for breaking through, Hiruzen made eye contact with her. No words passed between them, but his message was clear: stay out of this fight. Mito understood his decision, whether it was out of pride or a sense of duty, and respected his wishes. However, when Orochimaru made a fatal mistake, Mito knew it was time to intervene. The Anbu captain glanced at Mito, sensing the surge of power surrounding her. Mito stood and said, "Captain, I'll bring down the barrier. Prepare your unit to move in once it's down." Without waiting for a response, she disappeared in a swirl of leaves. She figured it would be a straightforward task to disable the barrier and, while she was at it, deal with one of Orochimaru's bodyguards. Assessing the 4 opponents inside, Mito quickly identified the greatest threat, a large boy with a mohawk who radiated an intense, primal fear. Yet, Mito knew from experience that size alone wasn't always the deciding factor. The second potential threat was a female member of Orochimaru's team. Mito found her sharp tongue grating, but she wasn't sure if that made her the most dangerous. Another member of the group had 6 arms, possibly a taijutsu expert or someone with a rare bloodline. The final individual had 2 heads, which immediately caught Mito's attention. After a moment of contemplation, Mito returned to the Anbu unit. She turned to the captain and said, "I will target the one with silver hair. When he's dealt with, the barrier will drop, and the others will be vulnerable. You must prevent them from reaching Orochimaru." The 7 heads nodded in unison. Once again, she vanished in a swirl of leaves and appeared in front of the 2-headed Sound Nin, Sakon. The barrier was all that stood between them. Sakon sneered, "What are you staring at?" Normally, Mito might have intervened, but this wasn't a lesson she was going to teach him. Instead, she formed the hair-hand seal, channeling her energy into the water molecules around her. She extended her hand, shaping a glowing circle in the air. Fuinjutsu, Raigen Tenshi, Sealing Art, Heartless Angel. The circle of light flickered into existence, distracting Sakon from the distortion that appeared behind him. With swift precision, Mito tossed an explosive note into the circle. It vanished, only to reappear behind Sakon, where Ukon, his twin, saw it and widened his eyes. The explosion that followed was deafening, and Mito watched as the threat was neutralized. Dear YouTube family, this series has been an incredible journey, and I'm so grateful for all of you who joined me along the way. If you enjoyed the content, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel to stay updated on more awesome videos. Thank you for your continued support. With gratitude. 6 Path Weeb.